This morning is a half hour of presentations from 3 different groups, and then a chance for you to visit with any of the 3 groups to ask questions. All of this information is intended to help all of us plan for down the road. And some of us have done a lot of planning, and some of us need to get going. So, Laura?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. As Ken said, my name's Laura Bach, and I work for Jen Becker, the Thrivent financial advisor, who has her office here in Faribault on the north side of town, and we also have an office in Northfield down on Division, right by a cupcake shop. So if you're ever looking for us there, just look for the cupcake sign. So, I was asked to come today to talk a little bit about financial planning. And so what Jen Becker does is you can hire her in the capacity of financial planning. And so what that looks like is she's sort of like a financial director, if you will. So she's here in the center of this idea. And so, of course, when you are thinking of your future and your finances and things like that, we have most financial advisors. They help you accumulate your wealth. You work really hard for your money your whole entire life, and you accumulate, and you get to retirement, and then what? So at that point, you need to make sure that you're working with somebody who can help you at that point stop accumulating and now start using your money to be an income or to work harder for you to make sure that you have the money you need to make it long into retirement and to be ready in case there are some life events that would come up, which they will come up. And so why you would want to use a financial director, if you will, or someone to oversee all of this is because they're going to help you with that distribution strategy. Risk management is something that we talk about during financial planning. And so you have lots of different risks that you could, that could come along and basically blow up your financial plan that you've got in your life. So unless you take a little bit of time to mitigate all of the possible risks and look at each one of them, you could be setting yourself up for failure. And so, you know, risks include things like maybe a part-time job loss, or if one spouse is still working and the other isn't. Job losses, stock market crashes, wayward children that need your assistance financially to maybe get through something in their life. Long-term care events are something that's on everyone's mind. And so we help you look at all of those risks and help you determine ways to mitigate them. Estate planning. I won't talk too much on estate planning, that's why John is here. But what Jen Becker does when she's helping you with a full financial plan is she is going to make some recommendations, maybe holes that she sees in your estate planning, or if you don't have one, she will make some recommendations on what she thinks you should do, and then she is going to work with your estate planning attorney, with your accountant, hand in hand, to make sure that your estate plan is specific to you, and it covers your needs, and it continues in helping you be set up for the future. Good morning, Marv. And like I said, John will talk about the estate planning, so I'm just going to kind of skip over that. But it's anything from documents in your basic estate plan to Jen would continue to help you look into real estate, account titling, life insurance, and long-term care insurance are things that we look at when we're doing estate planning. So we make sure to cover all of the bases. The FO over here on our little diagram is for our family office services. And so we actually, when you're in a financial planning agreement with Jen, you have the ability to access all of your accounts and all of your stuff through an online portal or program that Thrivent has put in place. We call it Money Guide Pro. And when you're in that financial planning agreement with her, you can access it, and it's a central location for all of your important documents and your accounts and everything like that. And we use that tool continuously to monitor your financial plan that she has put in place. maybe seems really kind of simple, drawn out like this. A financial plan with our office looks like an initial visit and then 5 or 6 follow-up visits over the course of about 4 or 5 months, and then you continue on with sort of what's kind of like a maintenance. So we continue to work with you on your plan and make sure that everything is going the way that we thought, that we planned for. So we always joke and say that you spend a lot of time with us. We become best friends because you are spending a lot of time at our office the first few months while we're putting it together. I work on life insurance and long-term care and disability policies for Jen. And again, I just have to remind you that I'm not her. She is actually camping with her family today. But I do have information about Jen, about our financial planning process. And if, like Ken alluded to, if you have some specific questions that you don't want to ask him out, just in general here at the end of the day, let me know, because I'll have you take a card and I will connect with you tomorrow to make you an appointment to visit with Jen privately in the office. She'll get to know you a little bit better and ask you some questions while you're sort of asking her questions as well. It's extremely important to have a financial plan, whether it's with our office or a different office. Make sure that someone has helped you plan for the potential risks that could be out there, and make sure that you're prepared for what could come. You've worked, like I said, really hard to accumulate your wealth, and whether you want to leave that to family or legacy planning to charities, your church, we want to make sure that we've helped you put together a full comprehensive plan to do that. So that's my spiel. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's go through this. We've got 10 minutes, so let's keep it going here. I'm going to talk to you about 3 things. These 3 items you need to cover in your planning. And I'm kind of going to go in reverse order, perhaps, of what people would consider most important, or the length of time it takes to do them. Healthcare Directive. This is a form. There is no one form. Mayo Clinic has one, Alina has one, the state of Minnesota has one. You can use whatever form you want. You can handwrite it. You can do it without a lawyer. There's 2 parts to this. The first one, you name a healthcare agent. And I'll get to the importance of this when we talk about a power of attorney. The form says, when I am unable to decide or speak for myself, I trust and appoint blank to ask for me. So notice it only goes into effect when you can't handle things yourself. So that's the first part. Very important. All those nasty things you see on TV and in the newspaper about family fights over whether to pull the plug on someone, they didn't have this. If they had this, those things seldom happen. The second part of it is an advance directive that says, I want this, I want these treatments, I don't want this treatment, I want to be buried, I want to be cremated, I want to donate my organs, all those sorts of things. People ask me, does it work? Yeah, it does. In fact, Mark used to be the pastor at our church, associate pastor at St. John's, and actually you called me when my dad died, I remember that. So my dad at 92 had a bad stroke, and my mom and my brother and I go to the hospital, and the doctor said, not going to be able to pull him out of this. What do you want to do? So we kind of look at each other, and then the doctor says, let's see if he has a healthcare directive, which he had online, it was on the records. And my dad, bless his heart, said, if I'm not going to regain consciousness, don't keep me alive. So it took an enormous burden off my mom, my brother, and myself. A decision like that, we've never looked back. That's a healthcare directive. Power of attorney, a little bit different. Power of attorney, there's one form. It's a statutory form. The Minnesota legislature says if you use exactly this form and make no additions or alterations, it has to be accepted by people. And this was very important because you make the power of attorney, let's say you later become incompetent, and you find out that somebody isn't going to accept it, that's a problem. But now you've got a form that they must accept. And often first the spouse and the children will be nominated as a person to act before you. The importance of this is if you do become incompetent, then you don't have to set up a guardianship. Guardianships, conservatorships, they're awful, very expensive, time-consuming, court actions, all kinds of trouble. With a power of attorney, you might be able to avoid that. Then somebody can act in your behalf. This is a problem for people that do not have a spouse or children, because you've got to find someone else you can trust, and sometimes it doesn't work. Occasionally you will read about this in a newspaper too, where a nephew has looted his dear uncle's assets. That does happen, and so you have to pick somebody you trust. Otherwise, it's extremely important you have this. I don't know how many calls I got. John, can you come over to the nursing home and get a power of attorney signed for my dad? Sure. I make house calls. And then as I'm about ready to hang up, I say, well, by the way, your dad's still competent, isn't he? No, that's why we put him in the nursing home. Now it's too late. Third part is an estate plan. And this one is more than I can bite off and digest with you in 10 minutes. You have to decide what's going to happen to your assets. And I just listed a few of the ways that that happens here. Your assets can pass by a will. They can pass by joint tenancy. Most of you own your house if you're married with your spouse as joint tenants. You can have a beneficiary clause. That's like life insurance or a retirement account. It says when I'm dead, it goes to this person. You can have a trust that I'll mention about a little bit later. And then something relatively new that has made it easier for people to act, a transfer and death deed. So you've got all your assets together and you have a modest estate. And you can get by putting all of them in like joint tenancy or a beneficiary clause or something else. But real estate's a little bit tougher. Well, the Minnesota legislature about 15 years ago have enacted something called a transfer on death deed. So they'll act just like the beneficiary clause in insurance. When I'm dead, the house goes to this person, no probate. So it's something that we use a lot to avoid things. So what happens with this? Well, with a healthcare directive, as I said, you can do it yourself. There's also, most places have community education and places that will help you fill it out. You can do it by hand. Power of attorney, a little bit trickier. A very simple document to prepare, so you probably want to have a lawyer do that. Estate plan, always have a lawyer involved. Things have gotten easier, and I'll mention that in a minute. So a lot of you could buy an hour of a lawyer's time and figure out what you're doing here. You may end up doing more things than that, but at least the lawyer will sit down with you and say, okay, list your assets, list how they're owned, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. A lot of people use trusts these days. The main use of a trust is often to avoid probate. It's probably the number one use of a trust is to avoid probate. The second use is probably to save estate taxes. The third use is if there's some unusual situation. You have a child that things aren't working out right for in life, you have a spouse, it's a second marriage, something like that. The trust, we actually use less of those in my office. Oh, by the way, I worked for 45 years in this business in Northfield, in Rice County, and now I retired when I turned 7. I used, towards the end of my career, less trusts than I did before, and there are two reasons for that. One is that the estate tax exemption for a person in Minnesota increased to $3 million. Federal exemption is $11 million. Therefore, the vast majority of my clients, the vast majority have no federal estate tax liability, and most of my clients no Minnesota estate tax liability, $3 million. Because of that, there was less of a need of a trust to do certain things. Because of being able to analyze your assets and maybe use a transfer on death deed, there was less of a need to avoid probate. Because if you plan it right, it doesn't happen. Example, An average person comes into my office, they may have $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million in assets, spouse and children that get along reasonably well. I can set it up with joint tenancy, beneficiary, transfer on death deeds, so we never need to use the will. I'll still have a will. Instead, I gotta have a will for backup, just in case something you told me isn't right or I missed something. But otherwise, never use the will. Never need, no will, no probate. So I'm just saying that things are easier now, much, much easier than when I started 45 years ago, or even 30 years ago, or 25 years ago. Visiting with a lawyer, you often can get everything straightened out, and then you work with your financial planner, and they put your beneficiaries the way you want them. Okay, that's primarily what it is. There's a lot in here, and much more than I could devote in 10 minutes. But these are the 3 things you need to cover. Now, who does this for you? Well, I'll often ask that, and I can be totally objective now because I'm retired, and the people that took over after me, they're doing very well. I set them up well, so all you have to do is just stay well. Find someone you trust. That is not something you see on an ad in the newspaper or on TV. You'll see people that will give you a free chicken dinner and talk about trust. We call it chicken dinner. You get a free dinner. You always wonder when you're getting something free, what am I really paying for this? Find someone local you can trust, and there are good lawyers locally. How do you find that person if you don't know one? Ask your friends. You know, your mom died last year. Who did you use to clean things up? Were you satisfied with them? Or I heard you talking, Mabel, that you had an estate plan done. Who did you use? Did they do a good job for you? That's the best way to do it. You want somebody local. Why? Whenever I was doing work for somebody, I always wanted to do a good job, and I think I did. But I also said, geez, I really have to do a good job because I see this person all the time, and I don't want them seeing me and feeling bad about it. So, anyway, that's the 3 things you need to cover. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you.
So the title of this series is Planning a Legacy of Generosity. And it's become clear to me that to do that, we need other people to help us. I mean, these are individual plans, and you are you have your values that you want to express through how you make decisions about money for the sake of your family. But we need people to help us sort that through and navigate. We had Theron 2 weeks ago help us talk about legacy giving. And Laura, people like John, in our community we have these trusted folks who accompany us along the way. Another part of this is at end of life, when death comes, which is one of the most challenging, and can be one of the most challenging times of our lives for those who are left behind. I think that I can speak for Carrie that we are very thankful for the funeral directors who are here in Faribault. We have good funeral directors, and I think I also speak for Carrie, that we would recommend you make use of them. They are good advocates at a time that's very difficult. They are compassionate, they're competent, they are professional. And so one of the things that we just want to commend to you as you make some of these decisions is that you contact one of them. Today we have, after our talk is done, we have some material from Parker Cole and from Bolt in the back that they left for you to consider. And then there's your church home, the congregation here. A part of your legacy, and that part of which we would argue would probably be one of the most important parts of your legacy, is that legacy of faith that you want to pass on to your loved ones. And Pastor Carrie and I and Annie in the office are here for you when death comes, to help you and guide you through that process, in particular with worship services. And so staff developed a document, and Carrie's going to tell you about that a little bit, and that's going to be available afterwards too.
Yeah, so there's a stack of these in the back, and it's this little green booklet. It says planning a funeral or memorial service at First English. We just put this together as a helpful way for those who are planning a funeral to be able to know what they need to know, and to hear some examples. So just a quick walkthrough, and then you can look through it more later. There's just an intro letter and then kind of what to do when first beginning. It also goes through the service and talks about why we do the things we do in the funeral worship service, as we do it in the Lutheran faith and here at First English. There's a brief just kind of summary of all the different components to worship as well as what they are. It answers questions like what do you do about military honors, or even things like how do we handle the lunch. There's a long list of hymns that are just suggestions. You can use whatever hymns you want. But I find that a lot of people, when they're wondering about, or when they're planning a funeral, are wondering about what do we do for music. So there's all hymn suggestions, and then the other question is, what scripture do we read? And there's also suggestions in here. This isn't a comprehensive, like, these are the only ones you can pick, but these are ones that are often used or people find meaningful or helpful as well, and just a little bit of information on memorials. And then just a word in the back about grieving, because grieving is strange, and it's a journey that is often individual for people and goes through at different paces. And so we want whoever is holding this booklet and whoever is planning the funeral to know that we are there for them. Whether it's someone who is planning their own funeral beforehand or their family members holding this in their hands, knowing that we are here for them and for you. And that, that hopefully this has a lot of useful information in it.
So as a guide to this, and we have a sheet. It's a worksheet. It's called a funeral planning worksheet. You take information from that. So for example, if you know the hymns that you want to sing, there's a place on this sheet where you can fill this out. So, and this is a pretty detailed sort of checklist at the time of death when you're planning a funeral that you can have someplace and keep with your important papers. We also, the section on the funeral worship service, you can remove and you can make copies and you can leave a copy at the church. We will keep it in a confidential place, and that will be there at the time of your death, and so that will help family members. You can also leave this with the funeral director, and they have similar sheets for you to use. There's also important documents and advisors that you can write down, and I know that both at Bolton, Parker, Cole, they have these as well. I remember having this conversation with my brothers and my mom not so long ago, and it really gave her a sense of peace, and she's one of those people that she likes to be organized and write things down. And so we know where this is, and at a time, I think that when we are grieving, when our emotions are in different places, there is some comfort about that, to have that there. And if it doesn't happen, it's okay. There are these resources here, and that there are people that can guide you, and we can do this together. So we'll have these resources in the back for you to pick up if you'd like.
Well, this concludes the presentations.